Hi everybody, Anthony Burrows here for Life and Finances with Sacrifice and Service. Now today I want to talk about the age of consent. That's right, the age of consent. But before I go into that briefly, the pandemic is kind of still raging around the world. Well, actually still raging because a lot of European countries, they are actually locking down and different countries are locking down. And then of course, some of our islands are now locked down and we're still in kind of relaxed lockdown here in New Providence. Now, after a meeting I had this week, a friend of mine was saying he was headed to a funeral. And I asked him, hey, this is a COVID case. He said, yes. His aunt, who's approximately 70 years old, apparently, as I got the information from him, she caught it from an adult child residing in the home with her. And the thing is, the adult child was asymptomatic, child between the late 20s to mid 30s, but the child was symptomatic and passed it on to her parent, killing her, causing her death. So, I guess it's a burden for her to have to bear. Let's look at the cases we have here. And the cases in the Bahamas to date, 7,324. Recovered cases, 5,282. Number of deaths, 156 deaths. When you look at the world system now and the worldwide, we have 53.6 million cases, recovered 34.6 million, and then deaths at 1.31 million, which at a death rate of 2.4%. And the Bahamas has a death rate of 7%. I'm skeptical when I look at world statistics because many countries, for political reasons and other reasons, don't totally give you their full picture. And so our 7% death rate probably is what it is around the world, but persons aren't providing the necessary information. Now we're talking about the age of consent, the age of consent. And the age of consent is the age that a boy or girl can say yes and legally have sex with another person, heterosexual, that is, the age of consent. And the age of consent in the Bahamas is 16. The age of consent was 14 up until 1994, and that was like that for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, the age of consent was 14. Now, the thing is that in many cases, this really held women back. It held them back because they could be in situations where parents would kind of marry them off, or whoever would arrange whatever for them, get them married off. And in many instances, they ended up living in poverty or did not end up in a situation where they were able to take care and maximize themselves. Women today is still earning a lower salary. We're talking about in the Bahamas. Now, you find that in the civil service and in some of the large established companies and corporations, ladies and men are earning the same salaries. But you find we have a situation where many women, the larger percentage of persons working in the minimum wage and below salaries or lack of livable wage are women. And women are more likely than men to be in poverty. With the household survey that was last done, they found that about 6%, our poverty rate was at between 6 and 7%. About 4 to 5% of that were actually illegal aliens and things of the sort. And then you found that women were around 3% in the poverty level and men were less than 1%. Now, when you think about it and look at it, I think I'm looking back at the women's suffrage movement that kind of brought freedom for women. And suffrage has a direct link to voting rights. Now, women in the Bahamas got the right to vote in 1962. And we know that in 1967 was when majority rule came in. And the thing is, the minority party got the larger percentage of the vote. They won the popular vote. Fortunately, you have to win your constituency, but they won the popular vote. And which means if it weren't for the women, we probably wouldn't have gotten majority rule until probably in the 70s, if that was the case. Wow, can you imagine that? And some of the leaders in the women's suffrage movement were Mary Ingram. There's a library named after her in Yellow Elder. Mabel Walker, a primary school named after her. Georgiana Simonet, I don't really know her. Eugenia Lockhart, yes, I know her. And so these women, when you think about it, we need to erect some statues for them. So women got the right to vote in 62. Free men got the right to vote in 1833, which was actually, this is free slave man got the right to vote in 1833, which was actually a year before abolition in the Bahamas. So it's just a fascinating, amazing thing. And when you think of the impact of the ladies that they had on the majority rule, it causes me to reflect on situations that transpired. Last time we had a newspaper article when I looked at University of the Bahamas females, which article was quite misleading, but it pointed out that 1 in 3 females in the University of the Bahamas, whether they were still in school or whatever in their lifetime experience, 1 in 3 were raped. 27% of them had sex underage, that is under 16, and 20% of them had ancestral sex, that's with a brother, a daddy, a cousin, an uncle, somebody, which is serious. So being female on this planet is no joke. But Jesus had a thing about females, this is my impression now. When I look at Jesus, the person who seemed to love him the most in that entire Bible was Mary Magdalene, because she was forgiven of a tremendous amount. She was a prostitute. Of course, she probably had some kind of addiction and other things that she overcame. And she was the one, remember, who prepared him for his burial when she break the alabaster box and spread that what they say, a year's salary worth of perfume and cologne all over him, and then wiped his feet with her hair as she wept. That woman loved him, and loved him in the term as godly love. And then the next thing, when Jesus was resurrected, the first person he showed himself to was a woman, which was Mary Magdalene. And then the first group of people to learn that he was resurrected were the women who came to the tomb that Sunday morning. So, but the thing is, when those ladies went to the guys and told them, they just dismissed them as, oh, it's no big thing. So when you look at it, women were always kind of looked and castigated when you look at it indirectly in a way. Now, what I want to look at is some of the age of consent in some of the other countries. For instance, Nigeria, 11. In the Philippines and Angola, 12. Spain just went to 16 in 2015. That's 5 years ago. Croatia went from 14 to 16 in 2013. Canada went from 14 to 16 in 2008. Iceland went from 14 to 15 in 2007. See, the way I look at it, when we look at this age of consent, and it was 14 for hundreds of years, and was raised to 16, like I said, in 1994, what we have to look at, if we're going to have a person 16 years old can get pregnant, have a child, and then now have to be able to feed, protect, and shelter a child, it means that we must now bring the age in terms of employment for government jobs got to come down to 16, which means we then have the legal age for marriage. We have to bring that down to 16. Alcohol consumption has to come down to 16. Driver's license, that has to come down to 16. You see, now the U.S. has a thing where they get driver's license at 16. Of course, you aren't able to vote and all those sort of things, go to war until they're 18, but that's for their economic thing to try keep their artificial economy going in this instance. But that's something, if you listen to other shows, you'll understand. And our voting age, which is 18, that now should come down to 16. And one of the things that you find in some countries, they have what is known as an exemption clause, which is close of age exemption. And in the Bahamas, we don't have what is known as the close of age exemption. That is, so a 16-year-old boy can be with a 15-year-old girl, or vice versa, and can be charged with rape, statutory rape. So these are some of the things that you have to look at. So if we're going to protect our women, it means that these voting rights and all these things, age has to come down to 16, or age of consent has to go up to 18. The chances of poverty at 16 having a baby is tremendous. If you can recall one of the millennials and their money when I had Pastor Lee Burrows on, the things he pointed out was that first thing, if you want to avoid poverty, is finish high school. Secondly, get a full-time job. And then the third item is then have a child, get married rather, and then have your children. So it's finish high school, get a full-time job, get married, have your children. He said that you're 98% likely to not experience poverty. And then when you look at it, let's look at it, underage births in the Bahamas. Now, the average age for mothers giving birth in the Bahamas is 31 years. Now, the percentage of underage birth in the Bahamas is approximately 30%. So 30% of every birth in our country is actually to a 16-year person that's under 16 years of age. Wow. More people, that means Foxhill Prison should be over women. But I guess people don't push it. And then I guess in some cases, they are persons of the same age, but we doubt that. Which is approximately 377 babies born a year to underage women. So that's a serious disaster that's waiting to happen. And so as we go forward, as a nation, we have to combat this and see the significance of this. People don't normally think about this until a young family member of theirs caught in this trap. And you're saying, hey, my 16-year-old daughter pregnant for some 40-year-old guy around the corner, and nothing can be done about it. And of course, in many instances, the young lady is abandoned, and you have to hope that they are in situations where they can have families that are in a position to maintain them and the child, and then be able to help the young lady to further her education. Now, one of the things I look at is that you find that the minimum age of employment in the Bahamas is 16 years, but you find the minimum age of employment for foreigners in the Bahamas is 18 years. Now, they following the world system laws in this regards. This is world law in this regards. But in our case, we are not doing the same for us. And this is my thing when it always comes back to self-hate. We are setting the right standard for the foreigners, but we are not setting it for us. And you know my thing, the self-hate is the characteristics when you value a person or persons from another group to have more value than you and persons in your group. But it's one of those things. And the Bible often speaks about it. You see, when persons came to the church, when James said, hey, the wealthy person, they said, come, where do you want to sit? The poor person, they said, hey, go sit in the corner over there by my foot. And I've seen it all the time, even in our churches. When Caucasians visit, you see persons, the persons who are handling the doors, they're stumbling over each other to greet them and ask them where they want to sit. When I show up, morning, afternoon, what have you, and hey, you have to sit here. So, but women are making a tremendous inroad in the Bahamas, because when you look at the University of the Bahamas, 6.5 of every 10 students are young ladies. And when you look at the BGCs and the BGCSEs and those, boys are 50% behind girls with A's and 40% ahead of girls with U's, and U's is the lowest. Now, we see a phenomenon that's happening in the Bahamas, which is families are making drastic and marvelous investment in their daughters and their education, and they're just letting the boys roam free, not pushing education because they say, oh, he could always learn a trade and what have you, but they're not realizing their daughter has to one day go and leave home and marry one of these same boys who they are not preparing. So then their daughter meets other young men out there who are not prepared and equipped because their family had that same thought process. You got to conquer that. We must conquer that. And then we must bear in mind when we say the hands that rocks the cradle rules the world, and that's a true thing, because mothers are normally the nurturing ones with the children. And so when you are nurturing these children, you must prepare them in terms of their financial understanding of money. That's the one thing. And then the next thing, you must prepare them in terms of appreciating who they are, understanding themselves and loving themselves. Because it's in loving yourself then you can love another. And I always say the main reason you can see the young men as they gun one another down in the streets, be it over drugs, be it over other women, be it over money. They gun one another down in the streets, but it comes back because they do not love themselves. As a result, they see the other person as just another inferior human being, just like me. And this is why I'm encouraging us, take up the mantle, parents. Start teaching the children to love themselves, to understand their finances, and then to be able to plan and chart a course for their lives. Now, as I wrap up, people are talking about this immune boosting system, and let me say this, this is only my understanding through the Holy Spirit and my lifetime. There are 4 key ingredients to sustaining and maintaining a good, healthy life and keeping your immunity up. The first one is sleep. Get that 6 to 8 hours as for an adult, and then if teenagers and things like that, you try to get your 10 hours sleeps. And then the next item, so sleep is first, then your mental health is next. Now we have a serious gene pool issue in the Bahamas because it's so small and we all mix up, and so therefore you have a lot of mentally challenged persons. But set that aside, your mental fitness. Third item is your activity outdoors, and then your food and water consumption. And the activity outdoors is that we've become slaves to the automobile. As a result, a lot of these diseases are now rampant among us because we are no longer walking. We are no longer outdoors being active. So bear these in mind. And remember the age of consent. If you so desire, write to your local MP. Encourage him to look at that and see if he could bring a bill now to either bring the age of consent up or bring the voting age, the employment, and all those sort of things down to 16. So, until next time, may the God of heaven and his Son, the Christ, bless and prosper you.